I missed last week's show, and I was so gutted about the whole thing that I decided I would commandeer the whole introduction, just jump right in, get rid of Dieter, get rid of Chris, Dan, that imposter. They're all gone. It's just me. And speaking of the introduction, actually, have you ever thought about who we're doing it for? Because I have. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, and I realized nobody actually comes to our show without knowing what they're coming in and getting themselves in for. So I'm not even going to introduce it. You guys know what this is. Hello, guys. Welcome to the Verge Mobile Show, episode 18, week of September 24th. I am Vlad Savov.
I'm Dan Seifert.
Hey, there's somebody else
Bone.
me.
Hey, how's it going?
And Dieter Bone.
Yes, sir.
Dieter Bone is joining us via a phone, which is really fitting, this being the Verge Mobile Show and everything else. So, Dieter, which BlackBerry are you using today?
Yeah, I'm not using the BlackBerry Dev Alpha B because I'm not a developer, I guess, so I don't have one. I don't own a single BlackBerry anymore, actually, which is sad, but also not sad at all.
It's sad, but it's also entirely not surprising.
Well, I mean, the thing is, I only own.
I'm really shedding a tear for it.
So, as you guys might notice that Chris is not with us right now. Hopefully he'll be able to join us in a little bit, but we're going to plow ahead with just the three of us for now. So,
well, I mean, the truth is we don't really like Chris, and we never have.
Yeah.
Speak for yourself, Dieter. Your vendetta with Chris is like a whole other thing. It's a whole other show. But that's actually a fitting number. Just the three of us. But just the three of us is a fitting number, and we'll get onto that because RIM was really bullish about having a real shot at number 3, which, as Dan was saying just before the show, is we're gonna take it all the way, guys, all the way to number 3. So RIM has high aspirations, high ambitions for its new platform. But we know who's number 1, or do we? Oh well, we know who shares the number 1 spot, and that's Apple with the iPhone. And I'm actually surprised. We've been talking about the iPhone 5 for so long. I'm actually surprised that it only just went on sale this past weekend. And
yeah, it feels like forever.
The initial sales have been, breaking records as usual. We've had a chance to review it. Some of you guys have had a chance to actually play with and use it. I've only seen it really, and play with that mock-up way back at IFA. So I'll let you guys take it away. I mean, Dan, how do you feel about the iPhone 5?
Well, like you said, it feels like it's been around forever. I mean, I've had mine less than a week, and it feels like an old friend because I knew about it for so long before it actually hit the market. But it's exactly what we kind of expected it to be. If you didn't catch our iPhone 5 review that went up last week, definitely check it out. But it's largely the same experience as the iPhone 4S, except everything is faster. The processor is much faster. You've got LTE data, which is much faster, and you've got slightly thinner, slightly lighter body with a bigger screen. But it's still an iPhone. It's still is iOS, so your experience hasn't changed too dramatically if you're coming from an earlier iPhone model.
Apart from your Maps experience.
Right.
Apart from the Mac experience. I just want to, in addition to the iPhone 5 review, we've also got an iOS 6 review that Dan worked on and I contributed to a bit. And basically, iOS is as iOS has ever been. It is iOS. It's the same. And like we talked about this last week, and my piece of that's very, very iterative. And I mean, to be very clear, like it's super fast. I didn't think that the iPhone 4 was slow, or iPhone 4S was slow, but the iPhone 4 definitely was chugging. And so the iPhone 5 feels much, much faster. And voice quality for calls is better. At least I think so. I'm talking to you on one right now. And I'm actually relatively happy with the battery life. I had mine run the gamut yesterday from 6:30 a.m. and it finally conked out, I want to say, around 8:30. And that was with moderate to heavy use and at least a full hour of phone calls. So, like, I would like that to be better, but it's definitely on par or slightly better than the LTE Android phones that I've used. And that's particularly remarkable to me because I'm pretty sure this thing's got like 1,400 something milliamps in it for the battery, right?
Yeah, I'm actually not sure exactly what the capacity of the battery inside of it is. But it's very light and it's very thin, which indicates that producers are saying it's actually 2,100, which actually sounds very high considering how light and how thin it is. If you compare it to other devices that have those size batteries, they tend to be a bit thicker or heavier. But like as you were saying with the speed.
That's iPhone 4.
Go
ahead, keep going.
Well, as you were saying with the speed, I was coming from an iPhone 4S, and I, like you said, I never felt like the iPhone 4S was slow. But moving from the 4S to the 5, the speed jump is like so dramatic to me. Even coming from Apple's previously fastest version of the iPhone, it's almost like you're jumping from like the 3G to the 4. That big of a speed jump to me, and I was actually kind of impressed. I didn't expect it to be that big of a difference.
Yeah, so the battery is 3.7 volt, 5.3 watt, 1430. No, that's iPhone 4S. 3.8 volt, 5.45 watt hour, 1440 milliamp.
So that's actually pretty small for an LTE device.
Everybody in chat is losing their mind that we didn't have this number on the tip of our tongue.
Whoops.
Hey guys, I'm on the phone. Give me a break. I think I just got a bunch of tweets about it too. Anyway, it's ridiculously small and ridiculously fast. So this new processor, this A6, is apparently incredibly power efficient and fast.
Right.
I would expect it to be, yes. Actually, from the things that Apple disclosed about the A6 processor, and of AnandTech fame, concluded that it's actually running an A15 Cortex A15 processor, which is super exciting because I haven't had one of those yet, and that's going to be the next big jump.
I think
performance and efficiency.
That's actually changed. I don't think it's an A15. It's
no, I know.
Oh,
I know.
Okay, all right.
I was building up to that. I was building up to embarrassing my good friend Anand. Shameful of me, but yeah. So his initial conclusion was that it has to be Cortex A15 because of the properties that Apple is disclosing, because of the battery life that Apple is disclosing, etc. Whereas on further review, Anand found that it's actually a mixture of Cortex A9, Cortex A15. It is Apple's, so to speak, fully custom chip, fully custom Apple design. So it isn't a stock ARM chip. Whereas previously, I mean, Apple has been saying, ever since it's branded its processors as A5, A5X, etc., and now A6, it has been saying that it's designing its own processors, but it was mostly sticking to templates, from what I know, ARM templates, and maybe just doing a few tweaks and optimizations here as there. Whereas now, Apple said at the time it took over that company whose name I don't recall anymore, a chip design company, said time to integrate it, work on it, and it's producing these really extremely efficient chips, like you're saying, Dieter, which, is good and all, and the bigger display is absolutely making the iPhone catch up with the 4-inch. I know there's a golden ratio, so I guess we'll call that the golden form factor as far as I'm concerned, 4 to 4.3 inches. So Apple is catching up on that front physically, and the display is now even thinner, making for the thinner phone overall. But ultimately, apart from this little tug that I had when the hype was at its highest and when we're building up to the launch and the release, I don't feel at all compelled to buy this new iPhone. Like, it makes changes which are in the right direction, but I don't feel like it's pushing me the same way that the iPhone 4, when it was first announced and it first launched, just pushed me and forced me to buy it. Essentially, it was like such a big jump and leap. But then you guys are saying that the user experience has improved so much, so maybe that would be the thing that might convince me. But seriously, about the maps issue, I saw the maps on iOS 6 on the iPad, and they look good and actually quick in terms of operation. I think they're quicker than Google's maps, which is down to the way they're coded. But the problem with them is that they actually suck in terms of just being maps. So what has your experience been there?
I've had a couple of crashes and freezes, but nothing worse than Google Maps. And I mean, I live in San Francisco, and so this whole issue that Apple's maps aren't as good as Google's maps, just in terms of the raw map data. For me, the pain point is losing transit. But in terms of street data and stuff, I mean, Apple's in California, and they've got lots and lots of data for my area. So like, it's not a huge tragedy for me, although not having transit really, really sucks. I think it's a bigger deal outside the U.S. and in rural areas. There's a lot of places where the map data just isn't up to snuff. And, we've got some reports on this. Chris had a report up that there was still a year left on the Google Maps agreement between Google and Apple decided, not to wait it out, to just, put their app out there. And apparently it took Google by surprise, which is in itself kind of surprising. But nevertheless, their new app for iOS isn't ready yet because of that. And there've been a lot of complaints about the maps, and I think it's. I mean, here's my take. When Google Maps first launched on smartphones way back in the day, the Java version that was on Palm OS, and the other versions that they had out there, it wasn't that great. It took them a long time to build up that crowdsourced data. And when I've been using mapping products, way back in the day, TomTom way back, and there was another one, Copilot. They had mapping, and all these different mapping services. Back then, it wasn't okay. They were not that good, but we dealt with it. The problem now is that the expectation is there that when you launch maps, they need to be really good, and it's just really hard to do that without years and years of data. So Nokia's got that time. Google's had that time. Some of these other companies have also had that time, but Apple hasn't, despite the fact that it's partnered in and brought a bunch of map data. And so, for a Generation 1 first release smartphone maps product, I think it's quite good. Flyover is pretty but useless, but I think it's fast. I think it's quite good. The problem is quite good doesn't cut it anymore compared to the competition.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that's actually the thing that has turned the mapping me scandal. I mean, actually, it's not a scandal. A lot of people are annoyed with it because they're not getting the same functionality, but most people are actually just making really kind of poor jokes about it and just having a big laugh. And I think what surprised most people, even those not tracking the industry as closely as we do, is that it's a really, really stark example of Apple playing catch up to others. Usually when Apple is trying to catch up to others, it does it behind the scenes and just comes out with the finished product. You're like, well, there goes Apple. Apple is doing the unique, the amazing, et cetera, et cetera. It's not like the other guys. Whereas in this instance, exactly as Dieter says, this is just version 1. It's the start of Apple's mapping product, and it has really, really obvious rough edges, which we're not used to seeing from Apple. And speaking of rough edges, here's a kick-ass segue. The aluminium on the new iPhone has been chipping away. Have you guys had that?
So
mine has not a chip, but a cleared up scuff mark, and it had it right out of the box. And I'm frankly surprised by this, because we know that it's possible to make aluminum that is very hard to scratch and get the shiny part underneath. We know because HTC did it with the 1S. And yes, the 1S can get scratches, but it seems like the iPhone, it's much simpler to do and show the shiny part underneath.
Well, I think in the case of the 1S, that is a very unique treatment to that particular device. That is like not anodization. It's not electroplating. It's like, or maybe it is a form of electroplating, but it's a very intensive type of coding that happens to that. And there were reports of that chipping as well, especially right when the phone first came out. And it's quite apparent that none of that treatment has been applied to the iPhone 5. It just seems like a standard anodization type of coating on top of it, which frankly, when you put other pieces of metal against it, it will scratch kind of easily. I think the real controversy or the uproar is that people, like you said, Dieter, are finding it this way out of the box, which is, again, not something that you expect to see from Apple devices. Apple's always been lauded and is always taken high regard for its type, quote, unboxing experience of pulling a device out for the first time and everything's pristine and clean and perfect. And that's just not the case for some people with the iPhone 5.
Just with respect to the 1S, the name of that process has been printed on my mind because I've written and said it so many times. It's micro-arc oxidation.
Oxidation, yeah, and it involves plasma bath, right?
Yeah, the plasma blast, that's right.
Yeah, and millions and millions of volts of electricity and all other sorts of exciting stuff. I mean,
so here's
first
my
of
take
all,
on the scratching. If ask me in a year after my phone has gotten scratched and dinged up if I'm angry about it. Because if this thing gets scratched and dinged up and it looks kind of cool and distressed, then I'm totally happy with it. Like, that's actually, like, kind of neat. That'll, give my phone character, and it'll look, it looks like the black phone looks like murder now, and to have it look like distressed murder would actually be really cool.
Yeah, that's like a breaking in process,
Yeah, if it's like those old, what were the iPods that scratched like crazy?
Yeah, the iPod Touches.
Like crap, if it looks like crap after it's scratched, then I'll be angry. But I'll just have to wait and see.
Well, if it has one thing going for it,
exactly
the matte finish is, I think, even if it got scratched, the matte finish won't look quite like as crappy as the chrome finishes that the old iPods had.
Yeah,
in theory.
Yeah, but also the issue with Apple's iPhone design since the iPhone 4, and I've been banging on about it, is that it's kind of too fragile, and it's also tries to be a little bit too perfect. I mean, we saw Johnny Ive at the iPhone 5 presentation, and he was talking about, again, this is the most exacting design we've ever done, it's the best product we've ever done, yada, yada, yada. But it is true that the design is so exacting, and it's really, really trying to go for this luxury look and appeal. And there's also the glass parts on the back. This is the thing that convinces me that the new iPhone isn't going to look really, really awesome when you scratch it up, because I know exactly what Dieter was talking about. When you have an aluminium product, whether it be cameras like Sony's NEX series or some of the older generation smartphones from HTC in particular, and it picks up a few scuffs and scratches, and it kind of feels like it's your own. Or even like a wristwatch, titanium wristwatches. People think titanium is such a hardened material, it doesn't scratch. Actually, it does.
I scratched my titanium watch in a week.
But I have a Seiko titanium watch, and I actually like its scratches. They're kind of like, these are my own. This tells me that I've had this product for a long time. We've been through things together, even if they're just completely mundane, right? The reason I don't think that is going to work with the iPhone 5 design is because of those glass parts, which move in a whole different design direction. They're about perfection and about, looking really pretty, as opposed to the ruggedness of having scratches. But that's only one aspect. It's one aspect. And the other thing I wanted to discuss is actually the front of the phone from what I can tell, sticks to the exact same, one big plate of glass design, which would be so vulnerable on the iPhone 4 and 4S design. And I think that's probably the thing that's putting me off the most from the new iPhone 5. I don't think the software, and I don't think the mapping issue is something that's going to put me off. It's not a deal breaker for me. I don't think things like, oh, well, this phone has 1280x720 resolution and the iPhone doesn't have that exact same resolution. Those aren't deal breakers to me. But I just don't trust that I can use the iPhone 5 in the way that I use phones and have it survive that whole year that Dieter was talking about. Like,
you just got to stop dropping your phones, Vlad.
Yeah.
You just got to stop dropping your phones.
I mean, I think that the iPhone 5 is a bit more rugged than the 4 and the 4S. I mean, yes, of course, part of it is it doesn't have glass on the back, but it does feel like, and maybe it's just because it's lighter, so it's less likely to crack if you drop it. But it does feel like it's less likely to shatter if I drop it. The other thing that iFixit saw when they did their teardown is they changed up the way that the phone is put together, and so you can take the first thing to come off is the screen and the display assembly, and so it should be much simpler to replace displays and cheaper, at least for Apple, to take a broken screen, replace it with a new screen. You don't have to take the whole phone apart. You can just take the screen off and plop a new one on it.
Right. I think there was actually some commotion that Apple, traditionally with the iPhone, if you had a broken iPhone and you went to an Apple store, they just kind of would take it and replace it with a new version or a new model entirely. And now I think there was a report saying that with the iPhone 5, the stores are planning to fix the screen in the store instead of giving you a whole replacement. So, yeah, that definitely should cut costs for Apple, at least, if not for you.
I was just going to say that. Cheaper for Apple, but does that mean cheaper for the user? Which it usually doesn't, actually. When you get these pretty straightforward, savings and costs, for whatever reason, they just can't seem to trickle down, which, us living in a capitalist economy, you would think trickle-down economics, the foundation of everything good and holy and all of that stuff. But anyway, I'm straying into a whole other territory. Can we wrap up this really, really famous and over-discussed phone by talking about Verizon and the LTE situation?
Yeah, so this is like really interesting. It's a familiar story. So the iPhone 5, if you buy it from Verizon, it has a SIM card slot, just like the Sprint model and the AT&T model. But the SIM card slot on the iPhone 5 from Verizon is actually unlocked. So you can actually put an AT&T SIM card in there and walk around using it on AT&T's HSPA Plus network, which is a bit of a surprise. None of the other LTE phones that Verizon has released are unlocked in such a fashion. If you try to put an AT&T SIM into it, it won't work. And so it's been kind of a bit of a surprise. We did see this last year with the 4S from Sprint. Came with a SIM card slot unlocked out of the box, and it was later on, shortly after the release of the phone, it was updated to actually lock the slot. But what's different is that Verizon's saying that they're not going to lock it in the future. They're planning to leave it and keep it unlocked, which started a kind of a snowball of theories thinking that the FCC's laws on the 700 megahertz spectrum that Verizon uses for its LTE network was requiring Verizon to unlock this SIM card slot for everyone. But Chris did an excellent report that kind of debunked that theory. And since the SIM card slot, the part that's unlocked to use, that allows you to use the phone on AT&T's network, doesn't even run on the 700 megahertz spectrum, and among other reasons, we kind of debunked that theory that it's just Verizon's just doing it for whatever reason it feels like, and mostly that it probably doesn't feel that it has a big loss to sell the phone unlocked instead of being forced by the FCC.
I mean, why do you think Verizon is doing it then, right?
We can move on now.
But hang on, real quick. Like, what's Verizon's motivation? If it's not the FCC forcing their hand, if it's not, is it Apple forcing their hand? Is it Verizon just like coldly calculating? Well,
I don't think Apple's involved at all.
Okay, so it's Verizon. Let's just assume that. Is it because they're going to have? They know that the Verizon LTE works better for LTE global roaming, and so Verizon's just like straight up saying, well, if somebody really cares about unlocking or having unlocked GSM, then we're going to go ahead and offer that to them, and not really advertise it, but just have it be out there and known. I mean, if that's what their justification and motivation is, it actually makes me really angry.
Why?
Because they will lock stuff down for no other reason, or for whatever their reasons are for locking stuff down, like Verizon always does. But this one time, they're like, oh, well, we can get a little bit of an edge here, so let's just not lock it this time. And it's like, be consistent.
Yeah,
If you're going to be a jerk all the time.
We tested this with Verizon's other LTE phones. Like we had a Razor M, and we put an AT&T SIM card slot, and it would refuse to work. It was definitely locked, and that's a very recent LTE phone from Verizon. So why Verizon's doing it with the iPhone 5, I really don't have a great answer other than it just doesn't feel like there's a big loss for it if it's unlocked. I think that most people...
I have a theory.
Oh, hello.
Hey.
Mr. Ziegler's here. I'm so glad he's here.
Machiavellian, Chris, because that's what my theory is.
Sorry, I was off having some really important DM conversations with the Federal Communications Commission. That's why I'm late.
Oh my God.
But yeah. So iPhone 5 unlock. So here's my theory. I'm actually going to reject your theory, Dieter, and replace it with my own. I think what's happening is Verizon realizes that the iPhone 5 is the first C-Block device that's high profile enough to catch the attention of mainstream news outlets, which in turn is going to catch the attention or be more likely to catch the attention of the FCC. So I think that they're actually hedging their bets and saying, well, because everyone that I've talked to, no one seems to be able to agree on exactly what the rules mean, whether only the C-Block support of the device needs to be unlocked or if the entire phone needs to be unlocked. I think the rules are intentionally hazy. They've never been tested. Nobody really knows what they mean, and we won't know what they mean until we go through the court system, which we haven't yet. I'm sure it's inevitable. At some point it's going to happen. But in the meantime, I think that Verizon is just hedging their bets.
Okay.
Well, it certainly has given Verizon a fair amount of good press because on the surface, it looks like a consumer-friendly move, at least.
I'm sure what's going to happen is you see a bunch of people. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind that the iPhone 5 is one of the very few devices where the subsidy is greater than the ETF. That's very, very rare. Or at least by this margin, it's rare. You get the $399 device, and I mean, actually, I guess the subsidy is the same across all three models. But anyway, so you can get a device on contract from Verizon, immediately break your contract, pay the ETF, and then take it to Simple Mobile, or T-Mobile, and there you go. And T-Mobile is pushing their iPhone, support so hard right now; it's hilarious. They're issuing press releases on it. So, I think that Verizon could end up becoming a reliable and desirable source for these unlocked devices.
Which is absolutely blows my mind, knowing how Verizon's been for the past decade. So yeah. It's just like really hard for me to wrap my head around that.
Although, let's just say for the record, we don't all agree with Dieter, who says, if you're going to be a jerk, just be a jerk all the time. Like, if this is the start of a beautiful new relationship between Verizon and its users, for whatever reason, that's a good thing. And I'm sorry to be
my whole point
consistently
is
trying to derail you guys from discussing the iPhone 5 and Verizon. But for the sake of our non-US audience and the sake of our audience who might be a little bit sick of this phone by now, which I am, and I don't even have the goddamn thing, can we please talk about HTC's Windows phones? Because they're kind of sexy.
Yeah,
I mean, they're super sexy.
Let's talk. I mean, we didn't really talk about them last week. I guess our show was just before the announcement, so we didn't really know what was going to happen. But HTC revealed its Windows Phone 8X and Windows Phone 8S last week, both of which look like really attractive devices that are running the, obviously, Windows Phone 8 platform. And what might be the most interesting part about this story is the new rekindled tight relationship that HTC and Microsoft have for these devices so far, or to the point where Microsoft actually picked the name out for the smartphones and put Windows Phone right in the name and is calling these signature devices for the platform, which is a little bit different of a relationship than HTC has enjoyed with Microsoft in the past. And Nokia was, the chosen one for Windows Phone for a long time, or at least that's how it seemed. And so this is a little bit different and a little bit of a shakeup in the Windows Phone family, I guess you could say. Just what are we, about a month away from its expected launch?
Did anyone figure out what a signature device actually means? Like, what are they saying with those words?
Well, it's going to be the center of the for Windows Phone 8 by Microsoft. So if we see Microsoft marketing Windows Phone 8, like if we see a printed ad, I would expect to see these HTC devices front and center, and then maybe to the side you'll see the Nokia, maybe further to the side you'll see the Samsungs.
Which is kind of pretty rough treatment
that's
for Nokia.
Yes, the Ativ is actually going to bring a Windows Phone into its own, and it's going to become the dominant platform because of the Ativ.
The Ativ S. Don't even get me started on that phone, which nobody's actually seen in person yet. It's still pretty much like a render and a photo out of Seoul at the moment. But, I actually got to see the 8X today, in fact, because I'm special and HTC do special things like that for me. And first of all, I think we need to separate the 8X and 8S a little bit. The 8S is such a mess of colors that I struggle to comprehend it. I think it has like 4 different color options, and only one of them is relatively consistent in being reddish throughout. There's the yellow, gray, and black version. I mean, you guys have seen these, right? They kind of.
I think the yellow, gray, and black version is so hot. I think the yellow, gray, and black is of all of the ones for the 8S. I think the yellow, gray, and black is the winner. I mean, it just looks cool.
You're nuts. You're completely guys. Back me up. He's nuts, right?
I'm with Dan on this one, man.
Wait, you're talking about the 8S, right?
Yes,
S Sam?
Yes, correct.
The 8S, yeah, the 4-inch one, the smaller one, the mid-ranger.
Well, that phone is completely irrelevant. So it's all about the 8X. I mean, look, I will say that HTC has taken a very, very different, you can look at it 2 ways. Dan, I'm thinking back to your report on color and how that's really playing into Windows Phone's angle. But color aside, yes, both the new HTCs and also, of course, the Nokias are very colorful. If you look beyond that, I just think that these are very different devices, the Lumia 920 and the 8X, because the 920 is such a thick and heavy phone that's really pushing camera quality, and that's something the 8X is not really seeking to do, and it's much thinner and I think sexier. So yeah.
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's accurate though, because HTC's like big differentiator with any of its devices, but is the image sense chip is going to be in the 8X, which is the first time for a Windows Phone device to have the image sense. So I think as far as in HTC's eyes, it definitely is innovating on the image front. Obviously, to the rest of us, it's not doing nearly as much as the Lumia 920 is. But as far as being totally different devices, the 8X and the 920 look really similar from the front, and if you like turn them on the side, it just looks like the 8X is a flattened version of the 920.
Yeah, but well, in pictures maybe, but I feel like in person they end up if you have the opportunity to hold them back to back, they end up being very different phones, I think.
Very much so. Very much so. Just to mention here, somebody tweeted because when the 8S and the 8X were being announced, Tom Warren is the guy who covered them, their whole release, and got to play with them a lot more than myself over here in London. My excuse being that I wasn't in the country. Otherwise, I would have been all over them. But so I was a little bit detached from them. But somebody tweeted at me saying, "Hey, Vlad, somebody took the 1X, or rather, HTC took the 1X display and they shrunk it down to 4.3 inches. You must be, thrilled about it. You must be really excited." So I was like, well, I need to take a look at this freaking Windows Phone 8X display. And I don't know that I really don't think it's the same exact technology as the 1X. It isn't quite so vibrant. It doesn't have quite the same viewing angles, but it is a really good display still.
I think it's very similar to what we saw in the Resound last year. The Resound was a 4.3-inch Super LCD 2 with a 720p display. I think it might be a little bit a newer version of that as opposed to the 1X's display shrunken down.
Potentially, but I mean, I'm a fan. I do like the display on the 8X. Just like Chris, I'm also a fan of the build and the design. And I definitely think that when you get the 920 in hand and the 8X in hand, you can tell a big difference. And immediately I can tell you that I prefer the 8X, again, because it's smaller, because it's thinner, lighter, etc. Not to say that the Lumia 920 is a bad phone or device, but it's still bigger and chunkier. But HTC is really shooting itself in the foot by losing track of the details with the 8X. And the details with the 8X are actually color. And maybe I'm being extremely nitpicky here, but the volume slider, the power button, and the camera button, they're a sort of orangish red, whereas on the red model, that is. Whereas the phone itself is a pinkish shade of red. And I really like the red version of this phone. But they're just not matching all the colors. So that red version actually has 3 different shades of the color. The yellow/green version, again, has multiple shades of the color. And it's those little things that just kind of pester and annoy you. And just finally, to mention on the topic of the camera, HTC is still keeping the software locked down completely. Like, they wouldn't let me unlock the phone. Like, there was an actual passcode lock on the phone. But because of the Windows Phone camera functionality, you can actually turn on the camera without unlocking the phone and take a few photos and look at the photos. And I'm actually impressed by the 8X. I just took a few quick photos with it, and I'm impressed by its camera quality. I thought that phone is so thin, they would go for a really cheap camera sensor, and it doesn't seem like they have, which is, thumbs up. So far, anyway.
I'd just like to point out how crazy it is that we have 5 now Windows Phone 8 devices, 2 Nokias, 2 HTCs,
yes,
and Samsung's Ativ, and Microsoft is not at any of these phone unveilings, letting people see the full story of Windows Phone 8.
No, and the software is nowhere near done, because even though they were locked, one of them managed to crash multiple times in the same way. I really don't think I'm supposed to be saying this, but whatever. I didn't sign any embargo sheet, so I'm just telling you guys. The software is not done, and it's slowing everybody down, and everybody would just love to be able to show off their devices to the fullest, but we're just going to have to wait. And if we trust Tom Warren, which I do, if I had kids, I would trust Tom Warren with my kids, it's basically going to happen, I think, October 28th.
What's going to happen October 2? You mean the unveiling of the platform, right?
I think we just lost Vlad. Yeah, that's when we're expecting to see Windows Phone 8 debut entirely, so that we'll see everything that Microsoft has been essentially holding back from us up to this point.
If they've been holding anything back. I don't think that it's clear that they have.
Well, I mean, I think Microsoft would like us to think that it's been holding a lot of things back, and that's the reason that it doesn't want us to see any of the software yet. But you have a good point, Chris. They could not be. They could just be.
If they're not holding
for no reason
back, then I'm going to storm Redmond with pitchforks, because
all tables in Redmond will be flipped if there's nothing new.
It's like, here it is. It's the thing that we wouldn't let you see for the past 3 months.
Did you guys know it has screenshots? It can do screenshots.
Well, so far, what does 8 have that 7.8 does not?
We know that it has the kids feature.
Kids Corner.
Have that on the site. Kids Corner.
Awesome.
And there's something with rooms or something.
Is that 8 exclusive, or is that also?
I know.
Uh-oh.
Windows Phone 8 supports higher resolution displays and multi-core processors.
Oh my God.
But 7.8 is mostly going to be for existing hardware anyway.
Right.
So, but I mean, I'm just saying that, when these platforms come out, presumably there are going to be differences between the two.
I mean, I suppose if Microsoft is holding anything back, it would be that. That's a pretty big thing to withhold, and that we haven't seen and we're not clear on yet.
What's that? Differences between 7.8 and 8?
Right. Yeah.
Well, yeah. No, that's exactly my point.
Yeah.
Right. We can expect some enterprise stuff that will only work in 8, in terms of device management and other corporate-y type things.
Yeah, but nobody cares about that.
That's one of the big advantages to switching to the new structure, the kernel.
Right. Yeah. I heard a rumor. I heard a rumor a few weeks ago from a very reliable source that Microsoft made a last-minute decision to port a bunch of supposedly 8 exclusive features back to 7.8, which I think pushed both. Yeah, which I think pushed both versions back a bit. And I was chatting with Tom about it, and he said, yeah, that made a lot of sense. So it seems like they might be looking to actually close the gap between 7.8 and 8. I don't know if that's designed to appease the 10 existing owners, or
I was going to say, I mean, you've already taken the bad press from having it, having to confirm that you wouldn't offer an upgrade path from Windows Phone 7 to Windows Phone 8. You've already given the fig leaf or the olive branch of a few features. I mean, just stick to your guns and focus on the new platform. Don't spend your cycles on 7. And I know that's crazy for me to say, but once you've made the decision and already taken the hit for not offering a full upgrade, I mean, unless there's something there that they're backporting that they feel is essential to the entire ecosystem, so that that all Windows phones can play together and have this feature, I wouldn't spend the development cycles on it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I would agree. I don't know what their business. I mean, first of all, it's a rumor, but secondly, we don't know what the business logic is.
Right. So, I mean, I totally agree with both of you. If that is true, then, why would you waste time supporting the older platform when for all things considered, your bet is on the new platform and all the things that are involved with that. So,
right.
We are stuck in an agreement.
Nokia's response?
Hey, Vlad's back.
That's what we're doing.
What was that, Dieter?
We talked really quick about Nokia's response to HTC's announcement. It was a little bit catty, as I recall.
It was very catty. Let me see if I can pull it up here. Now, the official response was referred to it as a, quote, tactical rebranding. And then, Nokia's executive, Chris Weber, posted some tweets saying that it takes more than matching colors to match the innovation of the Lumia 920. And happy to add a new signature to the Windows Phone ecosystem behind the Lumia 920. So it's it's a bit of a catty back and forth, and I don't think we really expected Nokia to respond in this fashion.
I certainly didn't.
No.
But I mean, it is a really weird spot that Microsoft is all of a sudden throwing a whole bunch of love behind HTC after, everybody just sort of thought of Nokia as the flagship Windows Phone device or the OEM. The difference is, if HTC's Windows Phone 8X and 8S, and I still am angry at HTC for calling phones X and S because I've got to enunciate so hard to differentiate them. Anyway, if they bomb out, if they don't work, they can still take another shot at Android. I mean, Lord knows that they're not going to stop making Android phones. But Nokia is all in. If Windows Phone doesn't work for Nokia, they don't really have a viable plan B. Not in the short term. Not for if they might have something in Skunkworks, but they're not coming out with another smartphone OS. I highly doubt that they would go to Android.
And it's interesting, the relationship or this new promotion behind HTC from Microsoft, because Nokia has put so much more investment into the Windows Phone platform between its dedicated apps for the platform. It's pretty much essentially pushed aside every other smartphone platform in order to push its weight behind Windows Phone. So yeah, like you're saying, if Windows Phone fails, Nokia kind of goes down with it, at least from what we can tell now.
I think that Microsoft owes it to all of its Windows Phone OEMs. I mean, these guys need to really stick together right now. They can't afford to be, to have a civil war. And it's Microsoft's responsibility as the patron saint of this platform to kind of keep the OEMs in line. And this behavior that they're exhibiting with these so-called signature HTC phones is not conducive to a healthy relationship between these OEMs, obviously. It's very strange to me that they're doing this. I think that they need to be treating these OEMs equally and fairly. And I think that after it took them a long time to try to convince everybody that their relationship with non-Nokia OEMs would not be damaged by the Nokia partnership. and they got over that hump, and HTC and Samsung came back to the table with additional phones, and now look what's happening. Now HTC is getting this special treatment, and it's very strange to me because, to what end? Like a customer goes into a store, they're certainly not going to say, I want the signature phone, because what does that mean? But then even worse, if a sales guy comes to them and says, well, we have these two devices, we have this Lumia 920, and then we have from Nokia, and then we have this HTC phone that's the signature phone. Then the customers can be like, well, I don't know what that means, but that sounds important or good or something. I guess I'll take the HTC. It's just bad. Like Microsoft should be the Switzerland of this platform, and they're not being that at all.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. I feel like this entire move to brand the HTC devices as signature devices is superfluous. It's not something that Microsoft needed to do, which together with the move that you guys were discussing to backport features down to Windows Phone 7.8 is kind of, you can just move on. You're big enough, you're major enough, people will either follow you or they'll, burn for the fact that they're not doing it. I mean, HTC still kind of wants to be split between Android and Windows Phone, and as Dan was saying earlier, is now re-emphasizing Windows Phone. Those companies, HTC and Samsung, they prefer to have some sort of a fallback plan if things don't go perfectly according to plan with Android. So, I mean, my only justification from Microsoft's perspective might be to say that HTC won't have invested so heavily into designing, let's say, the Windows Phone 8X. I'm not going to give HTC that much credit for designing the 8S. So maybe that's what it is. Microsoft, in giving HTC that branding and that extra cachet, gets in return more investment, more design time, more production time from HTC. Basically just gets better phones. I don't know. I just feel like that might have been something Microsoft could have just simply paid for, given that it has cash reserves and all of that. But also, let's quickly mention that Microsoft has its signature series with Windows laptops, and maybe desktops as well, but just Windows in general. And the signature series with Windows was just bloatware-free versions, which is kind of hilarious because that basically means every Windows Phone device ever shipped is pretty much signature because Microsoft locks down the software so tight. So if you have a Windows Phone, it's a signature Windows Phone. You can tell people that. Nobody's going to know what it means, but you can tell them that.
Well, I mean, what HTC was saying and Microsoft was saying about the naming of these devices is, as far as what the signature means, I believe Steve Ballmer might have said this, or it was an HTC executive that said when somebody goes to a store and they want a Microsoft phone or a Windows phone, this phone has Windows Phone right in its name. It's pretty obvious what it is. And I think that was what the idea behind the naming of these Windows Phone 8X and Windows Phone 8S was.
Well, it's pretty easy to draw a parallel to... Go ahead, Dieter.
I was just going to say, do we have to call it the Windows Phone 8X running Windows Phone? The Windows Phone 8, Windows Phone 8X?
Would it be even more confusing is the Windows Phone 8X running Android? That would really blow minds.
Oh, my God.
That would actually be pretty cool. With that hardware, it would be pretty cool.
But what I was just going to mention is that, Microsoft has already had this signature program in place on Windows, where if you go into a Microsoft store, they sell a number of so-called signature devices that are stripped completely free of third-party software, essentially, and it's just, pure Windows instead of all the crapware that you usually get when you buy a new PC. And so, from that perspective, if you think of it that way, Microsoft is really slapping Nokia in the face because they're saying, well, we don't want all your crapware on these Windows phones. So we're going to give a special brand to these HTCs, which are basically shipping, quote unquote stock. Even though I'm not too comfortable using the term stock talking about a Windows Phone device. But if you think about it like that, if people draw that parallel, if they've heard the term signature used with Windows PCs before, then that's certainly the impression they're going to get with these phones.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be like totally high. But isn't Nokia providing the mapping services for all of Windows Phone 8?
Yes.
So essentially, it would be like Microsoft saying, we don't want all of your crapware. We'll take some of it. but we don't want this other stuff that you insist on putting here. But we'll take your maps and we'll use those, and we're going to give those to everybody else as well.
Yep.
I'm just going to raise two quick points here. Just 2 quick points here. First of all, Chris somehow managed to miss the bit where I mentioned the signature Windows devices and decided to make that point after me. But he augmented it with something interesting about Nokia. So I guess we'll just allow that. Also, I'm an ocean away, so I can't physically.
Look, Vlad, I'm in a talk only mode right now. I'm not listening. I'm only talking.
How's that any different than normal?
The second point, actually, I still remember when Microsoft and Nokia announced the whole partnership, and Microsoft was making such a huge deal out of Olvi Maps being integrated into Microsoft's just broad range of mapping services. It wasn't just going to be it was just going to be Bing Maps. It was going to become Bing Maps, and that's where it's going right now. That Nokia's Maps is essentially becoming Microsoft's mapping software. And to me, at the time, I was like, why are they making such a big deal out of something so kind of regular and conventional as mapping? And now that Apple has tried to do it by itself, I can really see why that was such a big deal for Microsoft.
Oh, totally.
Like, acquiring that part of Nokia was probably worth it for Microsoft, just to save itself the sorts of headaches that Apple is enduring right now. Because if you think Apple is having headaches with maps, just imagine a company that doesn't have the same level of customer trust that Apple has, trying to sell them that sort of service. It would just be a nightmare.
and very good point, Vlad.
So here's clearly what happened. Back 5-6 years ago, when HTC and Microsoft were flying as high as they ever flew with Windows Mobile, Peter Chow, HTC CEO, and Steve Ballmer were out partying, and Steve Ballmer accidentally killed somebody. And only Peter Chow was the only witness. And so rather than report him, he took a chip. And now that HTC has fallen on hard times and the One series hasn't done so well, he cashed that chip in. And so that is why they get to call their phones Windows Phone.
I'm pretty sure that Steve Ballmer killing somebody is one of the storylines in Pulp Fiction, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, man.
It's got weird really
fast. So speaking of CEOs, let's talk about Thorsten Heins and what he had to show us and tell us at the new BlackBerry Jam.
Thorsten's such a nice guy. I mean, compared to Lazaridis and Vasily, he gets on stage and you just want to chuck him on the shoulder. Oh, nice job, man. And the other thing that's great about him is he doesn't lie about what BlackBerry is anymore. He admits that they're not going to be number one, which was this. He had this Q&A after BlackBerry 10 was quasi sort of kind of announced for the second time, but not fully announced, where he said we have a clear shot at number 3. And later on, he clarified and said, no. I mean, we're aiming for number 1 long term, and number 1 in all of mobile computing. In fact, he even took a swipe at Microsoft. He's like, you don't understand. People aren't going to use PCs. They're going to use phones and tablets, and we can be number 1 in both of those long term. But in the short term, he's like, we're aiming for number 3. We're aiming for number 1, but we have a clear shot at number 3, and they think they can pull it off. And I don't know. So that's the context for what they announced, which was BlackBerry 10 and a new device for developers.
Well, I mean, if we want to go back
tell us about it. What's happening with it?
This delay isn't a problem at all, guys.
Go ahead, Dieter.
Well, okay, I'll just jump into riffing on what BlackBerry 10 is. So we've already seen some of it. They showed it off once, and what they showed off this time wasn't the whole thing again, but it was another iteration. And they're in this weird spot where they've got to keep showing different parts of it so that they can get developers excited to make apps, because they need apps to make the platform succeed. But they don't want to actually have their full announce. So they have these half announcements. So what we saw at BlackBerry 10 is we finally know what the full UI paradigm looks like. And it's weird. You have up to 8 apps running at a time, and they're always running just like on the playbook. And they sit in these little things that they're calling active frames, which, by the way, is the worst name ever for a UI element. And they're like little miniature versions of the app. and you can switch between those really easily by swiping up on the screen. There's a grid of icons on the right-hand side of the home screen. You can swipe over to those. And then on the left-hand side of the home screen, and actually on the left-hand side of every single screen, is this thing they're calling BlackBerry Hub. And what that is a unified messaging and notification zone where all your email is there, your Twitter messages are there, your LinkedIn messages are there, your Facebook messages are there, and it's also developers can send notifications in that area. So you can make this swipe up and to the right gesture, which it works pretty well, but it's not quite as fluid as it could be, from anywhere in the OS to jump right into your notifications in your email, which is kind of cool. It's kind of clever. If you use your phone primarily for messaging, it makes a lot of sense.
So can I just jump in here quickly? Because I was looking at that and I couldn't possibly avoid thinking of the Nokia N9 and the MeeGo Harmoniton UI. Because that was based around 3 central home screens, which were notifications, applications, and multitasking. And in particular, with RIM's BlackBerry 10, you have 4 of these active frames where you preview. I mean, it's essentially visual multitasking. Preview the applications that you have running, and the Nokia N9 also has the same 4 app interface. So to me, it was like you're just copying them. I mean, I think it's a good thing to copy, but it's like, where's the innovation, RIM?
So they copied that from MeeGo. They copied from WebOS. They've copied from the iPhone because you can, you drag and drop icons. The icon grid is just like the iPhone's icon grid. I'm trying to think. Did they steal anything from Android? You swipe down from the top to bring up menus and stuff. I guess that's not Android. That's more WebOS again. But unified notifications. They basically just borrowed from everything that they could and slapped it together in OS. And so the question is going to be will it, when you actually use it day to day, will it feel, elegant and awesome, or will it just feel kind of cobbled together?
Well, there are 2 things to keep in mind here. One is that I'm assuming that they still have a number of TAT employees working on this UI, and TAT has done some really great stuff in the past. And also we'd heard at some point, I don't know if this is something that we wrote about or not, but we've definitely heard that there was a concentrated effort at some point in RIM's recent history to hire ex-WebOS people, and of course we saw a lot of striking similarities with the playbook, and I think that's ongoing. But one very important point that I wanted to make that absolutely no one on this podcast has made yet is that there's some striking similarities to Nokia's Harmoniton UI. At this point, I'm just trolling Vlad.
That's a very original point there, Chris. I'd like to hear you elaborate on that.
That's all I have to
Please
say.
do, Chris.
Well, I want to say, going back to the comment of being number 3, or they have a clear shot at being number 3, just for us to be clear, right now RIM is in number 3. It is still the 3rd most dominant smartphone platform. So really what their clear shot is just trying to hold on to what they have and not let any more of that slip through their fingers.
Yeah, he may have been referring to number 3 in North America, and I don't know if they still have managed to hang on to number 3 in North America. And he may have even been referring to number 3 speaking from an OEM standpoint, so it'd be Apple, Samsung, and then RIM, instead of iOS, Android, and then BlackBerry. But I mean, let's be really. They've also got some new enterprise stuff. They've got the thing where you can launch secure enterprise apps right next to your regular apps, and there's this weird toggle thing that you drag down on a blank spot on the icon screen to switch between which apps you can see. It's pretty weird. But I mean, if you got to have secure apps, that's, you got to do something, and it's going to be inelegant no matter what. But this battle is between Microsoft and Windows Phone 8 and RIM, and they're both trying to square the circle of appealing to enterprise and CIOs and IT guys for managing devices in a corporation and consumers at the same time. And I mean, I think Microsoft really believes it's going to just completely take over whatever RIM had left. And RIM is doing everything it can to keep that from happening. And until that battle shakes out, they're not going to be able to actually take on Android and iOS in a real way.
Okay, so DJ, I have a question for you. So if you just assume for a moment that what we anticipate to be the first BlackBerry device, BlackBerry London, also it was codenamed. Just imagine that it has great industrial design. So let's take industrial design out of the picture. Imagine it also has a great camera. Let's take those aspects, the hardware, away from it. Are you excited by this software that you're seeing today? Like, yes, it's a coupling together of a whole bunch of what we still think are good ideas from other operating systems. But if you see it all come together with great industrial design and it actually flows and is responsive, which are big assumptions, does that excite you? Are you going to be psyched for the first half of next year?
I'm intrigued. Like, I'm interested. I mean, Dan was complaining that my hands-on post with the latest version of that BlackBerry 10 beta was really long. And I was like, well, yeah, but this is the first new smartphone operating system since Windows Phone. And so it at least deserves some attention because like they're trying to make something out of it. And there are some pretty good ideas here. So I like good ideas. I like them to be successful. So from that perspective, like I'm interested. But am I psyched? Am I excited? There's nothing here that like makes my jaw drop. There's nothing here that makes you go, oh my God, I must have that. And I don't know what that would be in the mobile space right now because I'm cynical and jaded and hate everything. But they definitely don't have that. And since they definitely don't have that, I don't know what they can do to get it. And I don't know if, is it enough to like tread water, which seems to be kind of their goal, and like pick up a little bit back in North America? It might be, especially if like what's left of the loyal BlackBerry users are willing to transition over to it relatively quickly. But they definitely don't have something that is going to make somebody not buy an iPhone right now. They definitely don't have something that's going to make somebody not buy an Android phone and wait. Like it's cool, it's interesting, but it's not like, oh my God, I must have that. And I honestly don't know what they could have done to like engender that feeling. I wish they had, kind of, because I like the underdogs, but they haven't done that here so far.
I think it's a striking difference from what we saw in 2009 when WebOS was introduced. When WebOS was introduced, I think it had a lot of those things that are like, oh my God, this is incredible, and this is like really cool new ideas that we haven't seen anybody done before or anybody do before, and it's like one of those I must have it type of deals. We all know how that worked out in the long run, but RIM doesn't, like Dieter was saying, have any of that. These are all ideas that we've seen before that are just kind of cobbled together here and there into this RIM playbook type of user interface shrunk down onto a small screen.
Well, I mean, I will say, like, if Hub is done right, that is actually kind of new, but it's just not that, like, it's not like that jazzy, right? It's not that holy crappy, because it's like, oh, hey, you've got all your messages and notifications in one place where like acting on the messages and like talking to people and doing email is in the same place as, your Twitter notifications and your push notifications from your game and whatever else. So like taking those two functions and sort of throwing them all into one, relatively convenient place that's accessible from anywhere is a really cool idea. But we have to see if it's actually going to work. I mean, the other thing to point out is we haven't seen the full final feature set of the OS. They haven't officially launched this yet. We don't know, they haven't officially launched the devices, but they're in this weird spot where they're showing little bits and bobs of the OS, and then when they finally will completely launch it, a lot of it's going to be like, oh, well, we saw that before. And they're in a rock and a hard place because they've got to do this to get developers because they got to get whatever apps that they can. And so, like, I don't know, I would not want to be in RIM's position. And you're right that there are a lot of parallels to WebOS. And one of the parallels that they're afraid of is announcing everything and then having 6 months of waiting before they actually ship something. So they're announcing as much as they have to in order to get developers, but they're trying to minimize the amount of time between the full launch and availability of devices.
Can we talk about their other efforts to woo developers aside from features in their OS?
No, rejected, Dan. It didn't happen.
So,
I didn't see it.
You didn't see it? It might have been the best thing on the internet yesterday, Vlad.
I think we might have it queued up to play a clip for the show. Is that true?
I think I'm getting the nod from our control room. Yeah. So we kind of have to.
Let's make this happen.
Okay, so Vlad, I really hope that you're paying attention to this. Since you insist that you had not seen it yesterday.
Nah, I still don't know what you're talking about.
We have to make this stop. So let me say that this video killed at the developer event. Everybody loved it. They ate it up. They thought it was awesome. And I don't mean that they thought it was awesome unironically. Everybody was in on the joke, including, Alec on stage, the guy, the head of developer relations, the guy that's, the front man for this cover band. Everybody thought it was funny, and everybody was in on the joke that they were sort of making fun of themselves. Because, there's a big circle the wagons mentality around BlackBerry people right now and BlackBerry developers. So it let off a bunch of steam. But I mean, it's like cringingly hard to watch, right? And so the problem is they put it on the internet. And so while I get the joke and developers get the joke, is somebody who has some teenager who has a BlackBerry and uses it for BBM that, is going to see this completely out of context, going to get the joke and appreciate what they're trying to do.
Yeah, but listen, RIM has already set the bar so freaking low. Yeah, I mean, I can't even get the bar in the frame here. It's so low with his previous advertising. This is just excellence. For RIM, this is excellence. I think they had one with, I believe it was Christina Milian. Admittedly, my expertise on pop singers isn't as great as my expertise on HTC's backlog of devices, but it was a really, really terrible, confused, weird ad, which I think it had something to do with BBM. I don't even remember. I just remember being kind of cringing on RIM's behalf. It was embarrassing on RIM's behalf, and I'm totally with you. I can see why people like this, because it shows exactly as you're saying, a sort of self-awareness from RIM and a sort of humility that you absolutely will never have seen from Mike Lazaridis and from the former company. So this just makes the company more approachable. And being an underdog now, which is what RIM is, acting like one will help it ultimately. And I understand that a lot of developers aren't just going to start investing, their careers into RIM just because it's a cute company, but it doesn't hurt.
See, I thought I was the only one.
I have absolutely nothing to say about RIM.
I thought I was the only one that wasn't completely cringing and freaked out by his video. I know that some other people at The Verge this is the worst thing I've ever seen. Josh he tweeted, "This is the worst video I've ever seen," and it's bad. So I mean, it just
feels very Microsofty. This is something Microsoft would have done in 1998, and it just kind of reeks of that. I know it's supposed to be a very self-aware, tongue-in-cheek type of thing, but it just reeks of that corporate, doesn't really get it type of vibe when you're seeing it from the outside. If you're not there at the dev
what does
event.
Chris think? He's been kind of quiet.
He has nothing to say
guys,
about RIM.
Can we talk about the iPhone 5 for a minute?
Yeah.
I just have. Sorry, I hate to completely change this. We'll get back to RIM, but I was just sitting here holding this iPhone 5, and I observed something very important.
Wait, stop, back up, stop right there. I just want to point out that the thing that Chris said would happen last week on the podcast is exactly what happened. He didn't pre-order. He said he wasn't going to get it, and then he went and waited in line. I want to say you said you were waiting in an iPhone line not 1 but 2 days in a row. Is that true?
No, you're making that up. I was there only on Friday.
Okay.
Yeah. No, actually, I was in a tent in front of the Apple Store the night before. No. Yeah, it was really easy. Yeah, I guess I should talk about my my experience getting the phone. So AT&T just opened this quote unquote chip store in Chicago, which we did a piece on not too long ago. And I think that everyone just kind of forgot that it existed because it was like there were 10 people in line for the phone at 4 p.m. on Friday, and they had stock of everything. They were in no danger of running out of anything. Meanwhile, like a block down the street at the Apple Store, is a line around the block. So, yeah, anyway. So, but no, the only point I wanted to make, I'll be real quick about this, is that if you hold the iPhone 5 and tilt it side to side, the screen gets very dim, which is something that you don't have on the 1X, if I remember correctly. So I would venture to say that the 1X retains the title of the best display on a mobile phone.
So you're saying the viewing angles of the 1X are better than the iPhone 5's display?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Although, Chris, I got to say, Vlad made that exact point earlier.
Well, my only goal is to remake every point that Vlad makes from now on every podcast.
Admittedly, when I was making that point, I was making it about the 8X, not about the iPhone. And I'm not even sure that Chris was around at that time because Chris swooped in at some point like a superhero.
Right. Well, like I said, I was too busy DMing with the FCC. So. Yeah.
Chris's goal is to make your point over and over again, and my goal is to just troll the podcast and lie and take us off topic and get derailed, which I have done successfully. Also, there's one other thing that I want to say about RIM is that they gave out new developer devices to the developers here. They're calling it the Dev Alpha B, and they said they ran out of the original ones, so they had to give out, make new ones. And looking at these new ones, it's really, really obvious that this is basically the L series of London, the first device that's going to ship. And what they did is they took off the outer casing of the phone and replaced it with a big, ugly plastic box. It's very clear that that's what happened. And that makes perfect sense, too, because, why would they spend money making another device for developers when they need to start making the actual phones if they're going to actually hit their ship date. They need to have stuff in carrier testing now. In fact, they do have stuff in carrier testing now. So why would they waste resources making a phone that they're never going to ship when they could use the actual phone and just put a different box on it so that, they're not accidentally announcing the device today.
Right. By the way, Dev Alpha is a really great name.
On the Dev Alpha? What's happening there? What's the processor? What's the screen resolution, etc.? I'm kind of out of the loop.
They're not talking processor, but it's 16 gigs of storage, gig of RAM, and a 1280 by 768 screen. And I'm pretty sure it's OLED. And there's some hangups and crashes, but when BlackBerry 10 works and it's not bugging out, which it still is a little bit because it's still in beta, it's actually really fast and really responsive. So I'm pretty pleased with it. The screen resolution is interesting because RIM has told developers that they should target 1280 by 720 and 720 by 720, but that the first device that ships would be 768 by 1280. And that's just kind of weird that, they're telling developers to target a screen resolution that isn't going to be on the first flagship device that they ship.
Yeah, that is odd, and it'll be interesting to see how that's handled if it's done with letterboxing or I guess zooming or stretching.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure they recommended letterboxing.
So is that a sign that RIM no longer has the component muscle to source displays that they want? Instead, they had to take what was available on the market?
I think it definitely could be. I also think that it's them giving developers that guidance is actually kind of a nice thing because, they knew that the Square one was going to be 720 by 720. So they're just giving the developers as few targets as possible, which is something that RIM has never done. Like developing for BlackBerry has always been a huge mess. And, RIM has pretty much admitted it. And so it's, I was talking to Kevin from BlackBerry about this a little bit, that they're probably they're getting smarter about sourcing stuff, and they're getting smarter about making fewer versions of, their hardware, because with old BlackBerry devices, they was like redoing it all over again every time they shipped a phone. But I'm guessing that it was just a matter of like they had this screen they had to ship, and that the next one's going to be 720, and so they just tried to simplify the message to their developers.
Was there any other features of the Dev Alpha B hardware that kind of stood out to you, or just kind of more the same?
It's got NFC. I mean, it's got a camera. I don't know how good it is. It's a phone in a box that's meant for developer purposes. So there's not a whole lot to say there until we actually get to test the final hardware. Even if I'm right that this is the final hardware in an ugly shell, it's not fair to actually judge it, because they're not calling it the final hardware, and there might be tiny revisions between now and when they actually ship. In terms of like developers, like there aren't a whole lot of big names here. I think the biggest name here is probably Foursquare. They got trotted up on stage, but like Facebook is going to be on it, Twitter is going to be on it, LinkedIn's going to be on it. As far as I know, all those apps are developed by RIM, not by those companies. There'll be a bunch of GameLoft games, but there's not they didn't promise Instagram. They didn't promise Skype. They didn't promise Hulu. So there's a real big question of, do they have those apps lined up and they just are waiting to announce them, or are they just not going to have them?
Right. Actually, I was just going to say, go back to the device, it would be really hilarious if RIM came back and introduced the London or the L series and started telling us about how much thinner and how much lighter it is than the current brick that is showing up to people, and then tried to pitch that as like, this is how far we've come over the past 5 months. We took this old shell, we stuck this new one, and it's so much better. I mean, listen, the other thing is, like you were saying, Dieter, RIM is going to be trickling out announcements of features and things like that over the course of the next 6 months or however long it takes to, release his first phone, release BlackBerry 10. So Facebook and Twitter apps are a good start to having those at launch. I would be more reassured if RIM announced that it would have an email app and a calendar app at launch. Those are kind of important. But also I'm seeing here one of our headlines says that app submissions begin on October 10th. So, which is the 10th of the 10th. Whether you're using the US calendar or the normal Cuban calendar. Kind of a nice little coincidence. But yeah, so that gives a lot of time and space for RIM and others to do a bit of development and get the platform up to speed. So let's try and be, optimistic. Because that's what we can really do with RIM. Optimism.
Indeed.
Which is kind of the wrong note to wrap up on.
Yeah, usually we end on RIM, and it's always such a down note.
I mean, I think in some respects this is a down note, because being optimistic with RIM is like the most futile thing in the mobile industry. But
oh no, wait! I have a really quick down note we can end on. Samsung and TouchWiz and the dialer code.
Yes. You had some experience with that, right, Dieter?
Yeah. So, I mean, I haven't been following it too closely, other than because I've been here at the BlackBerry thing, but I did help test this. So, apparently, TouchWiz phones have a thing where you can dial in a code on the dialer and hit send, or I guess not hit send, and it will hard reset the phone and erase everything. It's actually relatively common on a lot of phones. You can send commands via SMS, and so someone figured out that you could send the command to open a dialer. Oh no, it's not SMS. You could send a command to open the dialer via an iframe in the web browser or just by clicking a link, which is similar to an SMS vulnerability. Anyway, the point is I visited the link and I hard reset my phone. But it was really weird because it didn't happen right away. It sat on the screen for a little bit. And so I had to test it a couple of times. And it doesn't seem like it's consistent across every Samsung device. I know, Vlad, you said you weren't seeing it on your Galaxy S3. Is that right?
Right. Not my own, but we've got one here in the UK, and we tested that one to death, and it just it didn't affect it. The thing here, and the thing that has emerged today, is actually that this is a more widespread thing, actually, than we initially thought. It doesn't seem to be TouchWiz specific anymore, which actually is a really helpful one, I would like to clarify, by making zero statements about TouchWiz. Like, if it's not a TouchWiz issue and you're Samsung, like, your first job would be to come out to people and say, this is not a TouchWiz problem. But it's a dialer issue. And somebody's done some research into it, has looked into it. They found the same vulnerability on other Android devices, so it's not Samsung exclusive, it's not TouchWiz exclusive. So we shouldn't just bash Samsung too hard. And apparently this is a vulnerability that's been identified and that has been patched. But this is the problem here, that it's been patched on some Android devices and not others. So the Galaxy S2 still needs a firmware update to get this fixed up. Some Galaxy S3 seems to be running the latest software, which makes it invulnerable to this thing. And then some others, like Dita's, seem to be running potentially an older version of software. Again, Samsung's communication here has been really sucky, to be honest. So we're not really perfectly clear on what exactly is going on, but the best thing to say is that the very latest version of the software, I mean, Jelly Bean is apparently completely unaffected. Galaxy Nexus devices are unaffected. If you have the very latest version of whatever Android software your phone manufacturer is making available, that will be your best way to avoid this. The other thing is, don't click links that you don't know where they're going to lead you to. Or don't click links that I send you to, because I sent that link to Dieter and he reset his phone. So it was my fault.
I think the answer is just don't click links. You don't do it. You can't trust it. Type everything into the URL bar manually.
Admittedly, that's the other thing. If you're clicking links on your mobile phone, something's wrong. Like, you really shouldn't be using a mouse on your phone.
Yes, this is entirely the user's fault. This entirely your fault. All right. On that note, I think that's a good wrap up for our mobile show this week. Wouldn't you say so?
Bring it.
I would agree.
Who's gonna do the outro?
I believe you did the intro, so you do the outro there, Vlad.
Oh man, I was asking that just so I could avoid doing it. But yeah, why not? Let's see. What are we supposed to say? What is important? Like I was saying, there isn't that much important information contained in the introduction when we know that everyone who's watching, listening to the live stream, the recording, knows what they're getting themselves in for. So really introducing it is kind of an act of vanity. And the outro is another act of vanity. But let's do it. Let's not meander with it. You can find us on Twitter. Dan is at DC Seifert, I believe.
Or Seifert, but yeah.
Dieter is at Backlon. Chris is at ZPower. And I'm at a really mysterious place that you don't know. Also, I'm trying not to tweet, so I'm not going to tell you where I am. You won't find me on Twitter, hopefully, at least for a couple of days. So I can, get in touch with my friends and my roots and shave at some point. You can email us at mobileshow@theverge.com if that email hasn't changed. And you can get in touch with us via our lovely, lovely website, theverge.com, where you can comment on this live recording post. Please do, particularly with critiques about facial hairstyles and other such things of import. And please take part in our forums. We do that too, and we love reading our readers' feedback and thoughts. So then we can, rip them off and talk about something new on next week's Verge Mobile Show. So until then, bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, guys.